Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Rue. I am the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and you are listening to or watching Human Potential at Work. Today, I have a guest on that is an international leader and somebody I've known his name for so long, and finally I started actually engaging with him when he and his partner Peter Fremlin created Disability Consultants Group, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But my guest today is Nick Corby, and he's with Equal International Consulting, which we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But he has been in the field of disability inclusion for a long time, and I consider him one of the leaders. And so I'm learning from him, and I think he has a lot of value to add in these conversations. So I was delighted when he said yes, that he would be on the program. So Nick, welcome to Human Potential at Work.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for the welcome, and that's incredibly kind words. Thank you.
Well, I really do mean them all. So I really have been very impressed. So Nick, tell us a little bit about who you are. And, first, how'd you get here? Tell us more about the journey of Nick Corby.
Wow, there's well, I'll try and give you the short version. Well, you've introduced me well. So, like you said, I'm Nick Corby from Equal International. I'm based here in the UK. Equal International is a consultancy group based out of the UK and South Africa. In terms of my journey, I've worked in the development sector now for 17 years. And I've covered a lot of ground in that time. I started in the UK Foreign Office and quickly went through UNICEF and the usual NGOs that you work for. And I've ended up in the disability sector. I've worked with marginalized groups and key populations, we call them, in other sectors. That's been my focus for the entire 17 years. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. In terms of where we are now, I know we'll talk about that in more detail, but there's some amazing work happening in the sector, and I'm lucky enough to be involved in some of it. And you've mentioned one, that Disability Consultants Group, Peter. I think you've had him on here before.
Yes. Great guy. Yes. Why? So tell us why. We talked a little bit about it with Peter, but why did you and Peter create this group? And I'll tell you, there's so many other groups and Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and tweet, blah, blah. But I really find this one very valuable. I enjoy what people share, and I find it very valuable. So kudos to y'all for making it a valuable group.
Thank
Not
you.
part of the valuable 500, but it really is a valuable group. So to me, I find it very valuable. So tell us more about the group.
Well, the seed of the idea, so we're very conscious as consultants that there's a risk you work in silos and you work in largely an echo chamber. And so Peter and I and a few others helped with the inspiration, were keen to create a community of practice where we break down those walls and we share information, expertise, knowledge to make sure that we really are working with the emerging evidence, the best practice, and joining up the dots which otherwise you wouldn't have. And it seems that others have joined our vision. There's now 85 members at the last count, covering every region in the world. And if you look at the convention, I'm pretty sure it covers pretty much every article in terms of expertise. It's the wonderful thing.
It really is, and the people that are part of it, they're doing such interesting work, and many of these individuals have disabilities themselves, and they're disability consultants with really great track records. And then we have some that are just starting out and saying, how do I even begin? And I love the community of practice that you've created. I think it's really powerful. I really enjoy the group. So, and I think you're surprised at how it's taken off.
We're enormously surprised. It's grown significantly. It's continuing to grow, and it's bloomed beyond what we had in mind for it, which is, it's a good thing. And I think what I'm particularly struck by is just the tone of the conversations. Everyone is incredibly collaborative, incredibly supportive. There's not some people can be very protective of their work. There's certainly not that. It's incredibly transparent and open, and Every other call we have is a deep dive into a particular theme, a particular conversation. And what I've been struck by is the access we have to expertise and the willingness of people to share their project, their work, the piece of work they've just finished, or an issue that's starting to emerge in the sector, and upskill everyone else. It really is a remarkable community.
I agree. And you know what? It's funny. I was going to ask you this question later on in the interview. And this will definitely be a theme, but you brought up a really, really good point. Lots of good points so far, but how do we really truly mainstream disability? How do we figure out the evidence about what already works, which we were talking about before we went on air? And that's in some ways what this disability consultants group is doing. I've been really, as you were noting, some of the links and the programs that have been shared and the papers, they're invaluable. I have found people very willing to share their work. And if we don't share with each other, how do we expect to really, really, move forward and really implement the kind of world that we want to see, where everybody's truly included? I just think so. I didn't know, maybe we could go ahead and explore that topic right now. And then I know that'll be the theme throughout the show.
Yeah, let's. I mean, it's again, mainstreaming. It's something that I've got a big appetite to explore, and we do a lot of work around that. And I mean, you've almost hit the nail on the head at the start in terms of how to mainstream. I remember speaking to someone at DFID here in the UK, around how they encourage organisations to take it on, and they said something that stuck with me and resonated so loudly: to start talking, to start being willing to discuss disability. There's no such thing as a bad question. There's no such thing as a silly question. But just start. Don't worry about saying something which isn't right or perceived to be, the wrong thing to say. Just start. And that's exactly what this group does.
So, Nick, how do you that I absolutely agree with you, and that's what I've done. The problem in the United States is that you actually could get in trouble starting and doing the wrong thing, which is sad. It's sad to say. I remember I was on this stage one time in Chicago, and I happened to be seated next to a lawyer who's just a brilliant, amazing man with just all of this really powerful information in his head. And he also happened to be a person with a disability. So he even more interesting, because he has a lot of his own experiences, and he acquired a disability later in life. Also interesting dynamics. And so somebody asked the audience, one of the audience members asked the panel that I was sitting on, well, how do we even begin? And the woman that answered the question, she had employed 4 people with disabilities successfully in a little retail shop, and it had been a real nice success. And she had talked about it, and she said, just start. And I said, then the mic came to me, and I said, well, you do live in the United States, and yay, we love living in the United States, but there are a lot of ways to get in trouble in the United States. And I pointed to the lawyer next to me, and I said, I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say about this, but I totally agree with you, what you're saying. And I think it's a shame that in the United States, corporations are actually often afraid to talk about the innovations that they're doing, the grassroots effort, the efforts from the top, because they are afraid they haven't done enough. And that's something that we haven't figured out how to resolve in the United States, because our litigation certainly has helped corporations be accountable, but at the same time has caused this divide between the community and the corporations at the same time. So it's unfortunate that we can't that we have to resolve that particular issue before we start the conversation.
Yeah, you raise a very good point, and I'd say it's not unique to the US, sadly. I mean, I've been in meetings too where the just start message, I think it's valuable, but it simplifies. I think we've all had conversations where we put our foot in it, and I think that you do learn as a result of how to navigate this sector incredibly well, and there are always going to be knocks and pitfalls as you navigate that. But I think what I'd what I'm always nervous about, I suppose, is organizations being too scared to start.
I agree.
And there are certainly ways that we can strengthen and bolster their efforts to help them avoid those pitfalls. There are some wonderful practices starting to emerge, and have actually been around for a while in different sectors. The UN, for example, we can go into more detail around that, but some of the work that UNICEF and UNDP are doing is remarkable. You look again at commitments being made by the private sector towards disability, some of the goals that they're setting themselves. Again, some remarkable initiatives. They just started, but I guess the luxury we have now is that there's now some role models that others can look to for how to replicate or improve and build upon what's there already.
I agree. I agree. And often, almost every time I meet somebody from a corporation in the United States and we start talking about the subject, I will almost always get an apology. And they'll say, well, we just haven't done enough. And well, we don't want to, until we've really got it perfect and really got it right. And it's like, please, as human beings, technology, everything is being disrupted and changing. And what does it mean? How do human beings interfacing with technology? Everything is disrupting. And so you can't get it perfect. We don't even know what it means to be perfect. It is interesting. And I also agree with you in that there's a lot of really good practices that we have out there. And now that we have groups like, the disability consultants groups and many others that are starting to share information. You mentioned, the UN efforts that are being made, and the UN agencies are starting to really support each other. And so I think that we're having some nice progress. And I know that you were involved with the Global Disability Summit last year, and it was a pretty big deal. And why don't you tell the audience what it is? And I know you're going to do another one, but I thought it was interesting. Certainly it was being done in the UK, and I wasn't surprised because I see so much innovation, so much activity coming from the UK. And but I was surprised when you also were tying it to Africa, and I thought, well, thank you, that's so cool. And it was specifically Kenya, I believe, in Africa. But I really liked that it was not just a conversation happening in well, the UK is multiple countries, but still in one area. So tell us more about that event.
No, I will. Before I do, I find it funny, our conversations sometimes. I mean, like I said, I've worked in this sector now for nigh on 17 years. And I find it hilarious how, not hilarious, well, actually, I do find it hilarious how we continue to talk about green shoots and how there's so much starting to happen, we say.
Yes.
And in reality, this sector's not, it's not just emerged, it's not just started. So I always reflect and think about that. But it is exciting what's happening now in the sector. There is so much potential and growth and appetite and interest, which is enormous. And that summit was certainly one of those golden moments, we call them here in the UK, where it just felt like things came together incredibly well, and it's now going to just shoot off and into 100 different directions and progress. Now I'm a big fan of the summit. I was hugely impressed, and we had a role to play. It wasn't it wasn't my baby. It was co-chaired by DFID and the Kenyan government. You're right there, and IDA. We supported behind the scenes and pushed and championed it. You could be critical and point to some flaws in it, but what came out of it was enormous. I mean, nearly 1,000 commitments made towards strengthening disability inclusion by, I think, 70 organizations. I have these figures in my head because we've just finished the 1 year on progress report. And those organizations, those commitments, they're not the usual parade of DPOs and disability-focused organizations. There were a real cross-section coming together there from some organizations who were challenging themselves quite hard. And some of the initiatives that came out, the impact that they could have is just, I mean, I get excited now just talking about it. Where we could be in 5 years' time it's remarkable. It's exciting.
Oh, that sounds very exciting. Can give us some examples, or maybe you're not allowed to?
No, I could certainly allowed to. I mean, the commitments are publicly available. I know
Okay,
that
good,
we're
good.
posted on the IDA website. The progress report we've produced discusses them and goes into some detail at country level. So no, we certainly can. But the ones that I could do many, but the ones that come to mind. I mean, there's an initiative around making sure assistive technologies are more widely available, and it's a market-shaping initiative where largely pools of funding will be brought together and put towards where assistive technologies are needed.
That's a great one.
It's great. There's again another initiative around inclusive education. NORAD and DFID coming together through the World Bank. The World Bank's disability strategy, the scale of what that could achieve,
Yes,
and the
what they're
IDA
doing with the World Bank.
replenishment,
Yeah.
it's enormous. So many exciting things. And to be honest, I mean, they're the big ones that get the headlines. Some of the smaller commitments from DPOs, you know, so keen to advocate and make sure that their governments deliver, so keen to partner with private sector organizations and make sure employment targets are met. You know, they don't grab the headlines as well, but there's so much. I think what's key for the summit moving forwards will be this accountability to make sure that these commitments aren't just a line in the sand that's drawn, that actually there is delivery of them.
And how can you do that?
So there's a few things. So we've been looking at this quite carefully. We've been working with DFID, and to be fair, again, I can't claim this as my own. DFID are incredibly ambitious, I've seen in what they want to achieve. So one thing we've been involved in directly is their progress report, that 1 year on. And that was a moment to look at what's been achieved against all of those commitments. And we did find that, again, I think it's almost 80% there's been progress against these 80% of the commitments.
Wow, that's amazing.
In a year. In a year. So already we're starting to see impact. We're already starting to see appetite for a follow-up summit. So this has clearly taken hold. But perhaps more pertinently, to answer your question, there's a long-term accountability mechanism that is being talked about to be put in place. And the work we've done, for example, is we've looked back at other summits like this. There's been ones on family planning, on transparency, on nutrition. And the key is to get that accountability mechanism in place. And by that, I simply mean a forum, and an independent group, a watchdog, who can come together, track progress, advocate for more, share lessons, all those key ingredients, which happens, but happens hopefully in a far more galvanized way.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So has the report published? Or it's going to publish?
The report was launched at the General Assembly in September, just past.
Okay, great.
So that's out there.
Do you mind sending me a copy of it, and I'll make sure that we provide a link for the audience so they
I'd happy to, and I'd encourage everyone to look at it. I think we've all got a role to play in making sure that the commitments that have been made so far and the progress that has been done continues. So I can certainly share that with you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And also let us know how we can get more involved. I know that I was invited to go last year, but I already had some prior engagements, but you know I want to help. So let me know how I can help. And I'm sure that some of my audience might want to help as well. And so, you know, I assume it always helps get corporate sponsorship and things like that to keep the work going. So, you know, let us know now and later, you know, how we can help. But I am curious, you know, how involved were other countries? So we've mentioned the UK, we've mentioned Kenya. I know, you know, I hope there were people from the United States involved. Once again, I was invited, but I just could not make it. But tell us about you know, who was involved, you know, country-wise.
Again, actually quite a large group, to be honest. So from the usual donors, there were commitments made, I know, by the Australians and by Norway.
All right.
And I could continue there. But USAID, you're right, there were some. Um, from developing countries, there were commitments made by ministries in Sierra Leone, for example,
Oh, how
in
fun.
Nigeria.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Good, good, good.
So many people stepped up. I think one of the ones which really leapt out, or at least one of the themes which really leapt out, was a focus towards disability data, making
Okay,
sure
I agree.
that
I agree.
countries are starting to get the information around prevalence rates, for example, in the use of Washington Group.
Right.
So there was a lot. And you asked, it's linked to your question around countries, and you asked around how others can help. I mean, there's many ways, but I suspect everyone listening to this will have access to those who made the commitments, will be in meetings with ministries, with governments, and just simply asking the question of, you made this commitment in 2018, how are you doing with that? Where's that
Right.
gone?
Right.
I think
And
just
then
shining a light.
applauding them when they are successful and they're talking about it, which is what I talk about in my book, Inclusion Branding. Tell us what you're doing so we can applaud your successes.
Exactly. I think it's very easy to keep criticizing and pushing
Yes.
governments to do more and more, but
Yeah.
there are times to shine a positive light and applaud them. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, we sometimes you have to catch people doing the right thing, and people are trying. I see people trying. Corporations, governments, they're trying, but we have to. It's a balance. It's a balance because you want to support them, but not just support them so they think they're done. It's a very interesting balance. Which is why it takes all of us working together.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting, and like you said, there has been progress. This isn't a new field. This isn't. I loved the point you made earlier. Little green shoots. This is actually there. People have been working on this since humankind began. So, um, but I am curious a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit more about Equal International? I know before we started the call, I just assumed, it was a disability persons organization and you're like, no, it's a consulting group. And I like what you're doing in that you're really focused on once again, equality for everybody, is it just, am I so naive to think that we could actually all be equal? Well, that's the world I want to see. So, uh,
No, I will. And again, let me just circle back around, because the point about applauding and shining lights. I mean, again, that links up so much the mainstreaming piece we spoke about. I mean, we simplified it by saying just start, but shining the light and inviting people, recognizing when there's a positive step being made, and inviting them to take the next one, I think is critical to that mainstreaming effort. And similarly, that long-term accountability around the summit. It's not purely going to be a watchdog. It can't purely be a watchdog.
no,
It has
no,
to be
right.
it has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be supportive and take everyone on that journey towards greater disability inclusion. So it's funny how all these little things link up like that. These key themes start to emerge. Equal International, yes, no, thank you for bringing us back to that. So it is a consultancy group. Where are we now? So we've got 4 directors and around about 40 associates. But that's the kind of the boring technical side of it to an extent. We're based out of UK and South Africa. The bit I find, or the bit I get most excited about is you're right, our focus, the equal side of it. We've all worked together within Equal International now for many, many years. We're all long-term peers and partners. And what unites us is a focus on marginalized groups. We've all worked in different sectors, health commonly, but education and livelihoods and others. And the focus for us is trying to bring those left behind onto the agenda far more than they are. In health, we call them key populations, for example. Sex workers, men who have sex with men, groups like that. Disability as well, obviously a huge focus for us. Some of the work we do, it's really around trying to advocate, trying to push these issues to the fore. Also, some of the issues we pick up, we're in that luxurious position where we can, work with those we like to work with and pick issues that we want to work on. And I find that the issues that we focus on are almost orphan issues, I call them, where things forgotten by donors, things overlooked by key implementing agencies. So it's not just disability we work on. I mentioned key populations in health, and perhaps the best example I can give of orphan issues is around drug resistance in HIV. We did some work with WHO recently where, the sector, the HIV sector, is so focused on treatment and prevention, it forgets that there's a drug resistance issue, which is perhaps going to undermine all those treatment issues. So bringing that to the fore. There's a huge tranche of work, and I find it fascinating to have that focus on marginalized groups running through.
Right, I love it. And do you mind just exploring that a little bit? I have not heard anything about. I haven't heard about the drug resistance. What do you mind just grounding that a little bit more? I'm just curious.
No, not at all. So there's an growing issue. I'm conscious we're getting off topic for disability.
Yeah, sorry.
No, not
causes disabilities too. So
well, true.
Yeah.
But there's a growing concern around the resistance to antibiotics, driven by quite a few factors. One is adherence to drugs. One is overprescription. There's so many issues. But one of the concerns that if you don't stick with your regimen of drugs, for example, you develop a resistance to that drug, which then means the effectiveness of treatment down the line is a problem. The cases of HIV and deaths increases, and ultimately you could get a drug-resistant strain of HIV in this case, but of different viruses down the line also. Antibiotics is big in people's media right now. There's lots of stories around resistance.
Right. That one I've heard lots about. Yeah.
It's the same principle all the way through medical.
Yeah. So trying to avoid getting something that you're going to have to take drugs to. Yeah. So it just shows the whole ecosystem of it. And yeah,
it does. And I think what's fascinating, again, what I find particularly interesting is for me, it's that consistency in access to services, and people with disabilities. We've seen this in education, in livelihoods, in health. We've seen it in just delivery and access to clinics. If you don't have that consistency and that quality, people, may not have the services they want in the first place, and if they do have them available, they may not want to access them because the quality is so incredibly poor. And so it affects that long-term gains and growth. And so I think you mentioned it earlier in this call around what works, evidence of what works. To get that is golden, and to act on it is just fantastic.
I know. And sharing those best practices and learning from each other. We've been doing that with assistive technology. And I was talking to some investors the other day, and they were talking about the exoskeleton, which I think is such a cool technology and such a blessing and benefit to people with disabilities, that need to stand up. If you have a mobility disability, that's a tongue tire. But they were saying, but Debra, how do we deal with the cost? How do you get this in the hand? How do you get these products, these technologies, these tools into the hands of the people that need them? And I said, well, that's the big, $1 billion question, isn't it? Because that is something, you think about something like the exoskeleton, which I don't even know how much it costs, but it used to be, $150,000. I don't know. It was very expensive, obviously. But how do you get into the hands of the people that really need it? How do you get into the hands of somebody that needs it, poor village in India? And I was telling them that's something that we've all been working on when it comes to assistive technology and other things for years, trying to figure that out. We're better when we figure it out together and we share the data. And I wanted to bring up something too that you had mentioned about getting the right data. And you hear people, somebody on LinkedIn yesterday made a comment that 1 in 4 people have disabilities in the world. And I wasn't trying to be all, but I was like, well, in the United States, 1 in 4 adult Americans have a disability according to the CDC. In the UK, we're hearing 1 in 5. In Canada, 1 in 5. In Europe, 1 in 5. Of course, we have the World Health Organization numbers that, 2010, I think, 1 in 7. But we knew the numbers were low because not all countries do census. Not all countries really know what their citizens are made of. And so you have the problem with that data. But if we can't convince society to include us when we're 1 in 7, which is significant, all the way to 1 in 4, 25% of us, how much more data do we need to convince you that we should be included? Still need the data. But I also wanted to point out another fact that I worry about things. That having the right data about people with disabilities and really having in-depth data about people with disabilities, like we do other parts of the population, what their preferences are, how they're spending, all the data that's being collected so that we can train artificial intelligence through machine learning and all that. We, unfortunately, as society have a lot less data about individuals with disabilities than the rest of the population, and that is going to cause problems with artificial intelligence in the future. Once again, we might accidentally leave our community out even more by not having good data. So we're real paranoid of data in the U.S., privacy of our data, and obviously, so are other countries. I am on multiple things that tell me what my credit score is and what if I'm in a security breach. Well, everybody in the world must know that my first dog's name was Lucky, right? Because my personal security, it's been, that was released in 9 different security breaches, Equifax and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes I wonder if we're worrying about the wrong things with our data and our privacy. And I worry that it's going to, unfortunately, impact the community of people with disabilities more negatively than, others, going right back to the disenfranchised, part of how do we make sure everyone's included? And are we naive to think we could all be equal? Aren't we equal? So it's just, and I'm not asking you to to answer all these questions, because they're big questions as society's learning. But if you do have the answers, definitely, but I think we're trying to figure this out as society, but these are real big issues.
Yes, they are. And I mean, I share your concerns. I really do. I mean, almost taking it back to base level in a way around the data and evidence. I mean, I agree there's privacy issues. My background is as a human rights lawyer. And so I'm always concerned about privacy and issues like that. It comes to the fore. But even at the base level, I've had some fascinating conversations around knowledge of disability prevalence and who beneficiaries are in projects and pieces like that. I had a strange conversation with a client once who said, "Oh no, we don't do work around disability because we work in humanitarian field and we don't have people with disabilities in our camps." Well, how do you know that? Well, they've not presented themselves. You work in a humanitarian area, there has to be. So it was a very strange one. What we have done recently, we do a lot of work with the Girls Education Challenge, which is an education flagship program with DFID. And there's around, I'm going to get this figure wrong now, so don't quote me on it. It's around 40 projects focused on education. And DFID have been great. They've encouraged it every step of the way, and we've asked every project to use the Washington Group questions just to collect simple data around prevalence, just to query who's in your cohort, who are your beneficiaries. And those conversations afterwards have been fascinating, because hidden disabilities, an assumption that children with disabilities won't be in project schools for various reasons, it's opened eyes significantly. And it then leads to ethical questions of, you clearly have a cohort of girls with disabilities in your project. What are you going to do about that? How are you going to include them? How are you going to involve them? And it's been fascinating. So I agree, on one level, too much data is dangerous and privacy, but at a base level, it opens up doors.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's a lot of data that's being collected. So we live in interesting times, but I know that I know I could talk to you for days, but let me tell us how we can learn more about, the work you're doing. Share some URLs on social media. I know, we talked about the Global Disability Summit, but also, any information, any URLs or links that you want to provide. And some of it, if you want to send it to me by email, I'll put it up on the website when we post the interview too, just so people can have the links.
Mm. Well, I guess a lot of a consultant is that all of your work goes through your clients. So a lot of my work goes through the client, sadly. Well, sadly, it's great, but I can't necessarily provide you a URL, which is quite sad. But I'm happy to send you absolutely everything I've discussed. I'll certainly share the report with you. The Equal International Consultancy Group has its own website, which is equalinternational.org. Please definitely go on there. The Disability Consultants Group it's an open forum to disability consultants, those who actively work in the field. And again, I'd invite anyone to come and join us because we are a friendly bunch and very keen to learn. You can certainly learn more about the work we all do in that forum, so please definitely join us. You can reach out to, well, you're in it too, Deborah. I fear don't reach out to you, but you can certainly reach out to me to join.
Yeah.
And the Global Disability Summit, I mean, that's, to me, if you want to learn more about that, there's the IDA website. All the commitments are on there. There's a committed website now out, I think it is, that's sponsored by DFID, which is much more logoed, Disability Summit. And the progress report is available on the DFID website. Yes, please go, and I can share all of these links with you after this.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll make sure everybody has the links. And yes, I agree. If you are in this space, you're a disability inclusion, consultant, or you want to be in this space and you're already starting, definitely join us on the Disability Consultants Group, because it really is, I think it's a very important group that is going to, I think it's going to continue to change things. Because if we're having success in one pocket, let's know about it and let's blend it into the rest and let's share. So I really, really appreciate your leadership. And thank you so much for agreeing to be on the program, Nick. I know you're really busy, so I really appreciate it. And we'll share all of the links with the audience that you provide to me, and we'll continue the conversation. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been incredibly flattering to be part of this, and I find what you do absolutely fantastic. Your back catalogue of these conversations is an enormous resource, so it's been wonderful to be part of it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for everybody that's listening. We really appreciate you. So bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.